According to the Illinois State Board of Education survey of school districts that has recently occurred, nearly 70% of school districts that responded to the survey in Illinois do not provide personal health and safety education or sex health education to their students during school year 2021 to 2022.
Well, that was, of course, earlier this year when they shared that data during a hearing inside an Illinois Senate committee. It was a late night hearing. About 10 o'clock is when they started that to talk about a bill to mandate every school have these new national sex education standards. Well, while almost 70% for the 2022 school year were not implementing the state standards, now 73% of the schools across the state are not implementing those standards. Welcome back. Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY. Springfield's News and Talk, and we discussed this yesterday with Shannon Adcock from Awake, Illinois, but it's all based off of a 2021 law that Governor J.B. Pritzker signed to align the state's sex ed policies with the national sex education standards, saying that the measure would, quote, modernize the subject with age-appropriate content for children in grades K through 12. But among the standards that drew some controversy includes different kinds of familiar families and types of sexual abuse that'll be taught between the grades K through 2. Grades 3 through 5 goes into the anatomy, gender identity, and sexual orientation. Grades 6 through 8, students would learn about different types of sex, different types of sexual exploitation and trafficking. Grades 9 through 10 would learn about the history of reproductive justice. Grades 11 through 12 would learn about power and privilege within sexual relationships. So these are some of the standards that the national sex education standards would have implement. But in 2021, the governor essentially lined up the state's curriculum with the national sex ed standards. And you had the proponents saying, hey, this helps, with affirming LGBTQ plus community, cultural inclusivity, age-appropriate material, but others saying that it goes too far. And even to the point now where the vast majority of school districts are not implementing this. When we talked with Shannon Adcock from Awake, Illinois yesterday, she shared with us some of the data that they found through the Freedom of Information Act, and what they found was that more school districts are not taking part in the national sex ed standards.
And so we did this Freedom of Information Act request to get a little bit more specific information on what school districts were reporting about what they have incorporated for comprehensive personal health and safety and sexual health education reporting. And what we saw is that advocacy did work over the last couple of years. Only 206 school districts out of the 758 have opted in. So that is great, great news. School boards are listening to the concerned citizens and saying, okay, we will not incorporate this. But when we dug into the data, we saw that some of these very large school districts have opted in. And they are actually reporting how many students K through 12 have opted out, meaning their parents have stipulated their wishes and said, please do not put our children into the classroom for these discussions. Chicago Public Schools, unfortunately, reported, and we have to take them at their word, that 0 students opted out of this curricula. So if that report is incorrect, we did do due diligence, and we did do a new Freedom of Information Act request to Chicago Public Schools asking, is this survey response correct? And so we do see a lot of opportunity, though, in other school districts where there's very low opt-out. And I think it's an issue of transparency, Greg, where school districts are not telling parents that they can. And they're not telling them when specifically this curricula is being implemented into a kindergarten through 12 classroom. And so with this report, people can go look for their district. They can see where the curricula is being implemented kindergarten through 12. And we have linked to the forms that parents can submit to stipulate their parental rights. And I think that this is also a very important education moment where, parents need to understand parental rights are not granted to you by politicians, right? They are protected. And actually, a due process clause of the 14th Amendment protects the fundamental right of parents to direct the care, upbringing, and education of their children.
So again, Shannon Adcock from Awake, Illinois, laying out their findings from this Freedom of Information Act request. And if you do go to Awake, Illinois' website, you can actually download the file, and you can look at all of the different school districts and their opt-out rates and whether they opt out or not. And there's 758 school districts here that have opted to go one way or the other. So be sure to look up your school district. Like, for instance, Gillespie is providing instruction. No children opting out of K through 2. No kids opting out from or opting in. You've got 3 through 5, 72 students opted in. So you can go through this and really kind of, find for yourself all of the different school districts. What about Springfield? Where's Springfield District 186? Yes, they are providing instruction. K through 12 students opted in, 2,914. No students have opted out. And you go on through and you can look at all the different grade levels of who's opted in and who's opted out of Springfield District 186. Go through and check out your school district, see how they stand on this. But one thing that's interesting is this measure was brought forward in 2021, and I remember the debate well, but earlier this year, in early January, you had an effort underway to try to make this mandatory for all schools. Because right now, schools can opt out and parents can opt out. But there was an effort to try to make this mandatory across the entire state. This measure did not advance, and here's why. I think you can hear some of the voices from the Senate committee hearing where they tried to advance this measure at the beginning of this year before the end of the previous General Assembly. And you hear voices from Republicans saying this isn't appropriate. You hear voices from Democrats even. You'll hear State Senator Linda Holmes say that she's hearing from schools that they don't want any more unfunded mandates. So here's how that played out earlier this year during a late-night Senate committee at the Illinois State House.
According to the Illinois State Board of Education survey of school districts that has recently occurred, nearly 70% of school districts that responded to the survey in Illinois do not provide personal health and safety education or sex health education to their students during school year 2021 to 2022. I believe all students in Illinois all Illinois public school students need and deserve age-appropriate, medically accurate, and inclusive instruction that will affirm them and help them to be safe and healthy. That's what this legislation here does today.
The standards went too far, and that's why we are seeing tremendous pushback by the school districts and their school boards, and we believe in local control because what's acceptable in certain areas of the school may not happen in other states.
Look, it's 10:46.
I understand.
In lame duck session, and there's nobody here from ISB. And we're talking about ISB standards, and no one's here. I would ask you to pull the bill until ISB at least can be here to testify. When you're having it at 10 o'clock at night, 10:30 at night, having a committee at 10:30 at night, and there's nobody here from ISB, that's scandalous. That's what makes people of Illinois hate our government. And it's not right. And you're better than this.
My concern in seeing this bill, and I'm really upset with this because I've been talking with a lot of my friends who are teachers, and what I keep getting back is literally, if the state of Illinois passes another mandate, we're already not meeting all the mandates that we have because, quite frankly, there aren't enough hours in the school day to do it and still teach math and science and English and the education that our kids need. I guess I'm just saying we almost need to take a step back and let's take a look at all the mandates we're imposing upon our schools and find out, is there any way to really fit them into a day or the week or whatever in order to cover them all? And I'm just not sure there is. So I, quite frankly, while I am all for age-appropriate sex education, really am concerned about adding another mandate.
So again, you've got that measure debated earlier this year, not advancing before the end of that General Assembly. And I think that it was pretty clear that with now 73% of schools deciding not to opt in, this is rather fascinating. However, some of the largest school districts have their students opted in. According to Awake Illinois' findings, 300,000 K-12 students from Chicago Public Schools, Elgin School, Oswego, Peoria, and Evanston District. Just in those districts, more than 300,600 K-12 students opting into this. But each school district, and if you go through the data, you'll see this, has different rates as to who is opting in and who is opting out. And in particular, you've got, for instance, Hazel Crest School District 152, 100% of K-12 students opted out, but 27.8% of 3rd through 5th graders opted out, and 17.5% of 6th through 8th graders opted out. So it's interesting to see kind of the breakdown of how many students in particular are opting in or opting out, and how many school districts are opting in or opting out. Because as of right now, it's optional. School districts can opt out and parents can opt out. And it looks like the vast majority of school districts are opting out, but the districts with the largest student populations seem to be opting in. So that's a little bit of a review of that Awake Illinois finding and the Freedom of Information Act request they got from the Illinois State Board of Education.